Hello and welcome to More Than a Game, a podcast about the A-Leagues, Premier League and more. This week on the show, Man United's new misery, a new bold fraud emerges. The Vuck Special Australia Cup kit gets just a single run out this year. Aussie takeover of the Scottish Premier Football League continues. And of course, we chat some more A-League and Premier League transfer chat. I'm Tommie C. Joining me this week is Damo. Mate, you're down at the holiday house today. How's your long weekend been?
Yeah, good. It's always good having a Monday off work to go away. So, yeah, down having a good time here with my family. So, ready to talk some football.
So wholesome. How good. And you're spending time with your family as well, I guess.
That's right. Football is always a priority, right?
I know. All right, mate. Let's crack on and get into your moment of the week. Take it away, mate.
My moment of the week is coming out of left field this week, and
I love a left field moment of the week.
Yeah, always. Alan Saint-Maximin. There was a video of him giving a fan a Rolex watch. Now, there's a backstory to this as well, which was even more interesting, is that the reason this wasn't random. The reason Saint-Maximin gave him a Rolex was this guy is part of Saint-Maximin's board game community and plays the game which Alan Saint-Maximin created and has put into the world. This board game called Helios, and he's the creator, he's the owner, and this guy apparently is a real big player in the Helios community, and so Saint-Maximin gifted him a Rolex. I went deep dive into this, and I was blown away that footballers' interests outside of football always blow my mind, and I did not expect Saint-Maximin to be a board game aficionado.
It's funny you mention like footballers and board games because it's not the first footballer that I've heard about in the context of board games this week. Look, to be perfectly honest, I am completely and utterly shocked that Alan Saint-Maximin is a board game aficionado. That's not something I would have predicted. Did not have that on my bingo card for this week or even this year, maybe. But look, one guy who I did think it was a little bit more sort of on trend or on theme, was Eric Dyer. Apparently, he's really into board games, and apparently, like, he couldn't get anyone at Spurs to play board games with him, so he just like sort of latched onto whoever, like the first person it was who agreed. I think it was Vertonghen. I think it was the person referenced.
Ever since Delhi left,
yeah,
got no one to play games with.
But like apparently he just like then Vertonghen just sort of humoured him a little bit and played board games with him. I think that's how the story goes, which I mean is a little bit sad. I mean Eric Dyer, I'm not his greatest fan as a footballer, but he's just seems like an okay bloke still though. But
he seems like the kind of guy that would try and organise a couples board night game, but he doesn't have a partner.
No friends, no partner, just real grim.
Right, mate. What? We'll get off the topic of board games. What was your moment of the week?
Mine. I guess I've got two. So first of all, Allianz Stadium opening up in Sydney. That's just a great story. Obviously, we've seen the Wanderers move into their new stadium just a couple of years ago, and Sydney FC are going to be moving into their new stadium. That's great. A little bit weird that the stadium keeps pumping out like random stats about like how much concrete they've put into it as like a flex, that's a little bit strange. But look, my actual moment of the week this week is comes from EFL 2. So EFL League 1. And there was, I'm not sure if you caught this clip where basically this player for Shrewsbury Town, the Cum Dogs X team, he gets there's a foul, and then he basically goes up to the referee and he's giving him an absolute gobful, and the referee, and you see the referee's face very, very clearly, and he says, there's one yellow card for the tackle, and there's another card for the dissent, and then gives him a red card as well, just all in the space of like 5 seconds. He goes from just nothing to 2 yellow cards and a red, and off he goes. And just the referee absolutely sends him. And oh mate, I was sent as well, because it was just it was great footage as well. I mean, I didn't even see the tackle, but you didn't need to.
Just a real coach killer.
Oh yeah, you can just imagine, and the guy would have just been like public enemy number one. Because I mean, in isolation, getting like a yellow card for a tackle or for dissent is sort of one thing, but getting the package deal for two cards and a red is just chef's kiss.
It's real League One areas, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Especially like you're getting into League One when a team has town in its name, right?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Mate, what about your own goal this week?
Oh, look, it's been tough to find own goals this week because just football being back, the Premier League being back, it just feels like a little bit of normality. But my own goal has got to be this whole Barcelona saga that keeps carrying on, and I'm sure our listeners know all about it, and the
They may not
finances that.
understand it, but they know all about it.
Well, I don't understand it, and I don't think anyone really understands what's going on, apart from the fact that Barcelona just are in this huge financial hole, but continue to spend money. They continue to try and sell assets or rights or whatever they've got to make more money just so they can register players, and they're trying to offload players and cancel contracts. And it sounds like a nightmare situation that could only get worse. And I mean, I think the latest is that they can't actually register a couple of their players for La Liga. Like Lewandowski played this weekend and scored a goal and it made headlines, but he's actually not a registered La Liga footballer right at this moment. So
Yeah, so a couple of points. So first of all, one of the problems for Barcelona is it's not like they can't just sort of register like one or two of the new players. They can't register any of them until they hit a particular threshold.
well, this is due
Even
to
there's
La
even there's
Liga's finance fair play, right? Which is separate to
correct.
UEFA's.
Correct, yeah. And so basically for every they need to make a certain amount of savings, and for every $4 they're able to spend one extra. If that makes sense. For every $4 that they save, they're able to spend one extra, right? So they're just sort of mortgaging everything on the hope that they can sort of bring all of these extra players in, and obviously they're trying to get rid of Frankie De Jong as well, and just sort of by any means necessary get him out the back door. But it's all going a bit Pete Tong, really.
And I think
Um,
the latest news as to why they haven't been able to register these players is Barcelona reported an annual turnover of something like 650 million euros, whereas La Liga, who independently analyzed Barcelona's turnover, actually reported nearly 100 million euros less. So there's this massive discrepancy in this, and that's why La Liga are saying you can't register these players, whereas Barcelona signed them thinking they could. And
so
that's where they're in this situation where they're trying to cancel Braithwaite's contract, but he wants them to pay him out. It's a nightmare situation, and we could talk about a whole podcast about this, I'm sure. But yeah,
I mean,
Barcelona are in the shit.
why they signed Daryl Braithwaite in the first place is just beyond me. But look, so one final thing on the Barcelona thing, and I mean, this whole situation is just wild. But one other thing that caught my attention today when I was reading about this specific topic was that Barcelona set up a shell company, paid some money to the shell company, and then used the shell company to buy some of their assets off of them for more than like what they're worth, basically to try and generate additional revenue sources, right?
Just
Which
really
is
CFG areas.
yeah, and I mean it's real money laundering areas too, right? It's like, man, like next thing you know, they're going to be setting up construction companies to do the new camp, and it's a mess. But yeah, that is wild. And look, I don't think we've seen and heard the last of that as well, because obviously La Liga doesn't start until this weekend. For those of you that have still got an Optus Sport account. But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see if the likes of Lewandowski actually get registered, because I think that is a train wreck that La Liga do seem to be sort of digging in on a lot of this Barcelona related stuff. So I guess we just have to wait and see. For me, my own goal, I got two, as always. The first one, it's quick. The Premier League new studio. I hate it. It's so bright. It's just white. It looks like a scene out of like Bruce Almighty or something like that when like God is there and it's just like a dude in a white background. I hate it. My other own goal though is the Nottingham Forest corner routine that they wheeled out against Newcastle. Don't know if you saw this one, Damo.
Yeah, I saw it. It's become quite infamous already.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of listeners would have already seen it, but if you haven't, basically it involved not a single Nottingham Forest player in the Newcastle box when the corner was taken. So it's basically that they've got 5 or 6 players that are running with a full head of steam into the Newcastle box, and to make it worse, the corner's terrible and just goes straight down Nick Pope's throat, and like there's not, I don't think there's even a Forest player within shot, like when he grabs it, and it's just like, man, that was so terrible. I mean, it could actually turn out to be like a decent routine, but I mean, you got to have a decent corner to sort of take a to go with it, though.
Yeah, look, I actually enjoy stuff like this, and you see a lot of routines, very training ground routines in the lower leagues, particularly where an assistant manager, that's his real thing, right? And he jumps in and he's like, "I own this. Let's do this." And to be fair, set pieces in the Championship and League One, a lot of goals come from set pieces, and you always see it with teams that get promoted come up to the Premier League, and this whole media circus happens around one of their set piece routines. The funny thing is Forest have been doing this for a long time under Steve Cooper, and they scored a lot of set piece goals in the Championship last season. And it was towards the back end of the year they were winning games 1-0, 2-1, and it was set pieces that were often getting them results. So they've come up to the Premier League, obviously, with the idea to do the same thing, and no one knows what's going on, and that works for a little while, but we'll see how long it goes on for.
Yeah, well, hopefully they execute them a little bit better than what they did against Newcastle next week. I think that was their one corner, and they didn't have a single shot on goal. So yeah, they're going to have to work a little bit more on that in training, I think. But look, all right, next up, we're going to be talking a little bit of a Australia Cup. So in the round of 32, we had, I think a little bit disrespectfully, they're called minnows, but the likes of Wollongong United and Mindle Aces were both knocked out by Green Gully and Avondale, respectively. You had the Jets and the VUC. They both got eliminated as the first A-League teams. They lost to Adelaide and Western United, respectively. Daniel Arzani made his debut for the McBulls, which, look, I know Daniel Arzani's got a lot of haters. People think he's overrated, makes terrible career decisions, so on and so forth. But, I mean, Arnie rates him, and we're heading into a World Cup in a couple of months. So the fact that one of our most talented but most underutilized players is getting a game can only be a good thing. Charlie Austin, he made his competitive debut for the Roar against Heidelberg. Damo, you got along to that one? Enjoy that one?
Yeah, it was a bit of a nothing game. We both went to that, Tommy. It was, I mean, you can probably attest to the fact that it felt like nothing much happened, really. Heidelberg were never in it apart from a 50 seconds at the start of the game and maybe 50 seconds between the equalizer and the goal that put Brisbane ahead again. So apart from that, it was pretty dead and pretty quiet around the ground.
Yeah, it was a real shame that the Raw took the lead just so early. I think it was literally 60 seconds after the first whistle. So, but still, we had a good night there at Olympic Park, I think it's called. So, good times. The 6 Victorian clubs in the round of 16, which is great, being that we live in Melbourne, so there's a pretty decent chance that we'll still be able to catch up with some Victorian teams in the quarterfinals as well. Also in the round of 16, Adelaide City are going to be playing Adelaide United too, and I think that'll be a lot of fun to watch if you're not going to get down to a game. But Damo, was there a particular highlight that you liked from the round of 32, or something you're looking forward to in the round of 16 in particular?
I think I said to you during the last set of games of the round of 32, I really enjoy watching top NPL clubs with a group of players that are nearly ready to make that step up, and now they're sort of on the national stage on free-to-air TV through 10 play, where everyone can get a look at them. I really enjoyed watching Peninsula Power from the Queensland NPL play from out at Redcliffe. They're obviously through to the next round as well. There's been a couple of NPL sides that have got some really good players that are probably ready to step up to the next level. I really enjoyed that in the last round. It'd be remiss of me to say that I'm going to enjoy watching Brisbane Roar again in Melbourne in the round of 16. They're away to Avondale, so I'll probably get down to that game. And yeah, look, there's a lot of good matchups in the next round, and as you said, there's 6 Victorian sides through, and I think 4 of them are NPL sides. So that's pretty good to see.
And this point here is the best part of the Australia Cup, because you've got these NPL teams that are sort of getting towards the end of their season. The A League teams are still very much in preseason. There's still 2 months until the A League kicks off, and so the gulf in sort of preparedness is never getting any bigger than this, and it makes for sort of some reasonably close games, considering these are semi-pro versus professional teams, and just the resource difference is just massive. So I'm surprised that there maybe hasn't been some closer games between NPL teams and A-League teams, but still, I thought Heidelberg still did all right and definitely didn't disgrace themselves against what is probably not the greatest of Brisbane Roar teams when compared with, I guess, current A-League teams and also historically Brisbane Roar teams. Moving on to a little bit of transfer chat. Couple of big moves in the last couple of days. Cornet to West Ham for 17.5 from Burnley. Cucurella, he went to Chelsea after not going to Chelsea, and then he was going to Chelsea. Kasper Schmeichel, he's gone to Nice. Sorry, Nice. Bernd Leno, he's gone to Fulham for just 3 million, which seems really good deal, I think, for Fulham.
It's a
I think
bargain.
Yeah. And then a couple of Aussie moves as well. You had Marty Boyle. He's left the Saudi second division, gone back to Hibs. And then just sort of, 2 days after it was announced, he scored an equaliser deep into injury time in the Edinburgh Derby. So good stuff for him. He's obviously not lost his touch in the last couple of weeks. And then just a couple of days ago as well, it was announced that Aziz Behich is headed to Dundee United to join Mark Birighitti. So that's great for him. Dundee United are a chance to be playing in the Europa Conference League knockout stages, the group stages, I should say. So that's good for him that we'll have potentially another Aussie playing in Europe as well. Tommie, that I want to talk. Go on, mate.
I was going to say just quickly on one of these transfers here, Cucurella to Chelsea. I'm not sure if you saw. You may or may not have. Gary Neville's pretty prominent on TikTok at the moment. He's been posting a lot of videos, and on the back of this transfer, he and his best mate in broadcasting, Jamie Carragher, made a video on if Cucurella is going for £55 million to Chelsea, what do they value themselves in this day and age in this market?
Ooh.
And Gary Neville said that he thinks he'd be a £60 million fullback. And then they agreed on the fact that Jamie Carragher would be a £60 million centre half with add-ons.
Wow, jeez.
But they agreed that the add-ons would be if Carragher won the league, so they would get no more.
They're really leaning into the meme there. I think that's probably not far off, considering sort of how wild the transfer market is. But I think you also got to consider what their age would be when they're thinking about selling themselves. Like, is it when they're like however old they are now? Is it when they're in their 40s?
Yeah, I don't know how much they'd be worth now. Probably maybe 60 pence.
I reckon a bag of red frogs. One transfer that I did want to talk about in particular, and that seems to be something that sort of was doing the rounds on social media, or that a few people picked up, was the idea of Alexander Pato moving to the A-League. Now, this is a guy who pretty much for the last 10 years has been living off of his reputation on FIFA 11. Has pretty much done nothing everywhere he's been. He did all right in China I think he was there for 2 years. He's gone back to Brazil a couple of times. He played 2 games in 12 months at Chelsea. And just it's everything that we shouldn't be doing in a marquee as far as I'm concerned, because this is a guy who, no disrespect to him, doesn't speak the language and doesn't strike me as sort of the outgoing kind of guy who's sort of going to do what Charlie Austin's doing and sort of mentoring young players and getting around on social media and sort of really trying to boost the profile of the league sort of on the back of his profile. And I just look at this and think, oh, please just avoid, because I think it would be pretty much. I just don't think he's even going to move the needle a lot either. I mean, the people that are that used to play maybe FIFA 11 or 2011, they're probably already um, A-League fans, and if they're not A-League fans, Pato probably isn't going to get them there either. So I don't know. It strikes me as just a terrible, terrible idea. I'm not sure if you've got
Yeah,
anything
look,
else to expand upon that.
it screams Daniel Sturridge 2.0 without the fanfare of the initial
Yep.
announcement. Like at least Sturridge got the announcement and everyone was like, wow, Daniel Sturridge coming to the A-League.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel if Pato comes to the A-League, it's like, I remember him.
Yep.
You know, and then he won't play. So yeah, I agree. It's the exact move the A-League wants to avoid, and hopefully it doesn't come to fruition. But we'll see.
All right. During transfer chat, I mentioned about some of the Aussies that have moved to Scotland. Obviously, I mentioned already about Dundee doing bits in the Europa Conference League. They beat AZ Alkmaar, I think it was 1-0, with Mark Birighitti playing. He was quite handy in the build-up as well for their goal. Aziz Bayic has just arrived there as well. But over the weekend, we had the Edinburgh Derby between Hearts and Hibs, two clubs that have already got a couple of Aussies there. You got Nathaniel Atkinson. He's been at Hearts now for, I think, probably about 12 months. Not really lighting up the place, though. Every time I see something, any sort of reference to Nathaniel Atkinson on social media, it's that he's just had a terrible game or he's been subbed off within half an hour.
I mean, particularly when, Hearts was playing a 34-year-old right back last night in the Edinburgh Derby. It's not a good sign that Atkinson really isn't in favour, is it?
No. And I've heard of two instances where he's been subbed off within 30 minutes, which, is really not great. Kyle Rolls, he played last night. In the bit that I saw of the game, he held his own and looked like he was doing quite well. Cam Devlin's yet to start in the league for Hearts, but he has come off the bench quite regularly for them, so he's still getting minutes, which is okay, and probably could be still getting some more minutes. Saw he's got a couple of starts in the Scottish Cup though, so that's good as well. Mentioned Marty Boyle, he's at Hibs and scored injury time equaliser as well. So lots of Aussies as well outside of those ones I just mentioned that have either just arrived or have been there for a while, and might even keep doing sort of a bit of a regular update on how the Aussies in Scotland are doing, because I mean it's probably second only to the A-League in terms of it definitely is second only to the A-League in terms of how many Australians are playing there. All right. Finally, one thing before we get into the Prem, and that's Ernie Merrick was announced this week as the Chief Football Officer for the FA, which is a very interesting appointment. More so in the fact that it was really vague and no one really understands what it means. First of all, I guess two-part question for you, Damo. What do you think of the person that they've chosen for this role, and what do you think of the role?
Look, I don't exactly know what the role is. My initial thought was that the role was more of a sort of tactical overview of what the national curriculum is, and he oversees that, and people who develop that report to him. If that's the case, I think it's a great role for him, because we've seen over the years he's just got this vested interest in the development of the style of football in Australia, and he's done that everywhere in the A-League. But then there's other rumors that he's, more or less of a face of the brand of Football Australia, to sort of be a disruptor in sort of a market that is football. I don't know how much value that's got, because he's only known within the football community. Who can he disrupt within that? Everyone already knows who he is.
He's the establishment.
Exactly, right? So who is he going to disrupt? The youth trying to come up. So
Self-destruction.
I honestly don't know what his role is. I believe if it's more of a tactical sort of oversight of the tactics of Australian football and development of kids in Australia, I believe that's a great role for him. But if it's not that, I don't know. I have no idea why he's there.
I think the other confusing thing about this, from I guess from a fan's perspective, is it's very difficult to tell if he's done a good job or not. Because I mean, I'm sure he
It's
has
almost
some
like
sort
they're
of
just
goals to
rewarding
achieve.
him for a career within football in Australia, to be like, here's your retirement package. Thanks for your service. That's what it feels like almost.
And I do think that someone like Ernie Merrick, who is super knowledgeable, obviously cares a lot about the game here, and I think he's someone that it's worthwhile keeping him around football. And maybe it was a bit of a case of he's been doing some work, I think, with St Kilda in the AFL as a bit of a sort of leadership consultant or something along those sort of lines. And maybe it was just a case of we want to keep him around the game. We'll create some sort of a way that he can be involved in football in Australia rather than losing someone super knowledgeable, understands the game here, and probably has a very clear view in his own mind of what's wrong, what needs to change. So maybe that could be why he's just got such a really random job title, and no one knows if he'll or how he would be a success.
Just sort of a be all end all consultancy role for football in Australia.
The Ralph Rangnick of Australian football.
I really hope not.
All right, let's get into the Prem though. First up, the weekend saw the Premier League returned. The biggest thing that stood out to me, though, it was that some of the teams looked massively undercooked. I thought Wolves, Forest, Southampton, and even to some degree Liverpool as well, all seemed miles off where they would want to be at this point in the season. And that's not, I guess, unusual that you see some teams who maybe aren't quite ready for the season, or maybe pre-season hasn't been quite as good as they might have hoped. But still, I was quite surprised at sort of how poor some of the teams were this weekend. Still lots of good games, and I thought they were all still quite close, but still was quite surprised at how poor some of these teams were, though. On the note of, I guess, mediocrity, there was a couple of things that stood out to me, and that was that there was 3 own goals this weekend. McAllister, Mac Allister, Mo Salisu, both shanked it into their own goal, while Mark Ahey had a glancing header past his own goalkeeper. Mate, which one did you like best out of those 3?
I think I like the best because Mo Salisu has now got more goals in the league than Mo Salah. So we'll go with that.
Oh, that's so good. The other one that it wasn't an own goal, but it very easily could have turned into one, was Jose Sarr coming very close to just dribbling the ball into his own goal, which was just like, I'm not even a Wolves fan, and my heart was in my mouth, and I thought, oh my goodness, what are you doing? And I think De Gea did something, or Allison did something very similar last season. And I mean, like I say, even when it's not your team, you're still going, ooh.
If any of these things happen in the A League, it's peak A League, as we like to say. But because it's the Premier League, it's forgiven.
Yeah. Mate Kazonis on Twitter, he asks, which preseason prediction is already looking like milk left out in the sun?
Probably anyone who predicted Manchester United to be in the top 4. I mean, Eric Ten Hag, he's got a long way to go. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think maybe top 4 at this point. You'd even wonder if they're going to make top 6 if they continue to be. I think a lot of people thought that they would be a new team this year. They've made some changes. They got rid of some of the dead wood, but in some ways, this season could turn out to be worse than last season. Obviously, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge just yet, but yeah, and maybe now's a good opportunity for us to talk about Manchester United, though. Eric Ten Hag has emerged as the Premier League's new bold fraud, as Man United were pretty easily swatted away by mid-table rivals Brighton. 5'9" centre-back Martinez was amongst their best, though, as Ronaldo sat on the bench until 2/3 of the way through the match. 2 goals for Pascal Gross were enough for Brighton to get the win, though. Mate, how much fun do you think it's going to be watching Man United? They've bought Christian Eriksen and Lissandro Martinez, 2 great midfield players in the Premier League and in the Eredivisie, and yet they're still playing a double pivot of Fred and McTominay.
Yeah, everything about Ten Hag last night confused me, right? He
Mm,
has religiously played a double pivot, a 4-2-3-1 in the Eredivisie. He's been really successful doing that. But if you look at, sort of the average positions of the players that played for Manchester United last night, it more looked like he played a 4-3-3 with Christian Eriksen as a nine, or a false nine, if you like to say.
mm.
Um, he insists on playing Rashford forward, wide on the left, and that seems like the only thing that Ten Hag has sort of committed to as his season is playing Rashford in an attacking wide left position. So, I mean, FPL managers, bring Rashford into your side because it doesn't look like he's going to get dropped.
I think he's only like 6 million or something. He's like really, really affordable, and you think, oh, Rashford, 6 million for sure. I'll get him into my fantasy team. But I tell you what, you looking at that Manchester United team performance, you wouldn't be looking at getting any of them in. I think, and yeah, pretty grim.
I mean, if you're a
Um,
Manchester United fan, there's not much good from that game, is there? You can't really take much positive from that. Ronaldo was on the bench. The situation doesn't seem resolved. He still got on the field. They're playing with a recognised nine on the left wing. They've got a number 10 at number nine. They've got Bruno Fernandes, who is a 10, who is playing as an eight, and they've got two sixes who don't know what they're doing. Like, there isn't much that you can sort of take away from that game, as at least we've got something to work on.
Yeah, it was really interesting that they played that Ten Hag played Ericsson as a nine. Maybe that was deliberate to, especially at home in front of the board, to say we need another number nine. And funnily enough, on that very topic, there's been a rumor that's emerged today about a new number nine that Manchester United could be signing. One of my favourites from a couple of years ago in the Premier League, Marko Arnautovic, could be making a return. What are your thoughts on that, mate?
Is he really a number nine? I feel he's just Rashford, but but not Rashford. Like, he
With more
wants to,
tattoos?
yeah, he wants to play wide and he wants to open up to the field and run at people. I don't know if he can play as a nine. I
Look,
I feel like it's just, it's just makes no sense, that signing. I mean, you've got more context to who Arnautovic is and how he plays, having watched him at West Ham for years. But does he even work there?
I think Arnautovic was very good at West Ham. I think he was only there for about 12 months, maybe 18 months. But he was very good in the sense that he was a converted winger who was playing up front, because he had sort of the physical attributes, and he was quite skillful. He was able to sort of be converted into a striker, and he did that very, very well. I think it surprised everyone how well it actually turned out. But if you're Manchester United, surely you should be looking at other options other than a converted winger who, look, I think he scored 13 goals in Serie A last year, but the guy's like 33 as well. Like, he's finished. Like, there's a reason why he's doing well in Italy, and it's because it's
It's
nowhere near
finished.
as fast. There's a reason why. There's a reason why he's scoring a bunch of goals in Italy rather than sort of in La Liga, Bundesliga, or in England. It's because it's a slower league. So, um, yeah, it's not only that. So I mentioned that that's a strange move, but the other one that has been rumored this afternoon is Adrian Rabiot, who looks like he could be on his way from Juventus um, to Manchester United. Which, look, on the face of it, you look at both of those moves and you go, yep, Marko Arnautovic, Rabiot, yep, they need a striker, and they need probably sort of a six or an eight, depending on, he's sort of flexible enough to play as both, Rabiot. But if there's one thing that both of those players have in common, it's that they're both just diabolical for your sort of squad, like mentality, or just sort of like having a peaceful, settled squad. And if either aren't happy, it will just turn to absolute custard really, really quickly. Do you remember Rabiot's incident with the French national team? I think it was at the World Cup in 20. I think it was 2018. It may have been the Euros, but it was either one of those two. Do you remember the incident that involved Rabiot and
I
his
don't remember
family?
him particularly. I just remember a lot
No.
of them. There's been a lot of incidents with the French national team, so
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't
true.
surprise me.
So the reason why I bring this up is Rabiot was that bloke whose mum took massive issue with something that happened with Mbappe, with one of Mbappe's penalties at some point during the tournament. And to the point where like his mum was basically making a massive scene. And I think Rabiot's mum has gotten involved like a bunch of times and just made an absolute scene. And
It's like
like,
under 10 football. Like, my son isn't playing enough.
yeah.
Put him on the field.
Or like, oh, the star player, he didn't take a penalty very well, like, and so you're just making a scene and just pissing everyone off. And it just seems like both of those guys, I think, talented footballers, but there's a reason probably why no one at this point, none of the Chelseas, Real Madrids, and the like, or are looking to get either of them in, and it's because they might be talented players, but I think Jose Mourinho said that Arnautovic he had the worst attitude of any player he'd ever come across. So that's saying something. Anyway, next up, my West Ham, they hosted Manchester City last night. Basically business as usual for City as Erling Haaland made his Premier League debut. He helped himself to a penalty after he was brought down by West Ham substitute keeper Areola. And he got a second in the second half as City showed off a new direct approach that Haaland will surely lap up. Going from Edison to Haaland in 3 passes and absolutely just scything through the West Ham defence, which featured 22-year-old fullback Ben Johnson as a centre-back with Ogbonna, Diop and Aguerd all unavailable. Of note as well, in terms of West Ham, Skamaka came on and looked good for the final 30 minutes, but this City side demonstrated that they're still the team to beat, and this was probably the best performance of the round. I'm going to go out on a limb. Everyone knows how good City are, but I don't think anyone expected them to be sort of quite so good just even in the first week. So, yeah, grim times there, I think, for the rest of the league.
Yeah, look, City, like you said, everyone have expected City to be really good, and there's a lot of expectation on Haaland and what can he do? Can he come into the league? And I think Wayne Rooney had a really good quote from an interview he did after City's game, where he said, as you know, paraphrasing, he essentially said that there was a lot of detractors that really enjoyed seeing Haaland play poorly in the Community Shield, and I mean, in every group chat, he was one of the meme strikers of the league after he had one shot that missed from 7 or 8 yards, but Rooney
Norwegian
also said,
Lukaku.
yeah, exactly, the Norwegian Lukaku that was getting posted everywhere, and but Rooney said that you know he sees that he will score a lot of goals in England. He'll prove everyone wrong. He'll be the difference in the title race. And he thinks he's capable of scoring more than a goal a game in the Premier League. I mean, that's coming from someone who would essentially say that they are a Manchester United fan. They are a Manchester United legend who is praising a Manchester City player as the difference in the league title, someone who will go on to do great things in the Premier League. So, coming from Wayne Rooney, one of the greatest Premier League players of all time, that's a very telling sort of indicator that Haaland is here and he's going to do big things in the Premier League. And I think a lot of people after this game have been like, "Yep, I get it. I get the hype. He did it in Germany. He's done it for Norway, but can he do it in the Prem? He's played one game and he looked like he could have scored 4 or 5. Let's be honest."
Yeah, the thing is, I guess, about Haaland at City is that we've seen the likes of Sterling and co just get tap-ins for fun because this City team is so good at just sort of creating opportunities with those sort of 40, 50 pass sequences. But that second goal for me, that was very different to what we've seen from City for the
Well,
last couple of years. Not since
it's
sort of
almost
Sane was at his best a couple of years ago, right?
It's
Um,
almost in a way where Liverpool went from this Klopp style of really high press, really possession based football, where they would sort of pass goals around and pass balls around and nearly pass it in the goal, and this time and time again. And when they actually won the league, they became a very direct side. They went straight from the centre half to forward, or straight through midfield from Thiago through to the front line. It almost feels that Guardiola has seen and sort of, in a way, been able to replicate that with the players in his own team, where people assume City are going to try and pass the ball around you. But now they've got the option of Haaland, who can play on the shoulder and get in behind anyone, any defender in the Premier League. Haaland can get behind. So they've just added more strings to their bow, which is a scary proposition for other Premier League sides.
I mean, we've kind of said before how the dude is just like a physical freak, right? He's like what 6'4" and probably runs like 100 meters sort of in sort of track speed, right? But I'd
And
never
a
really
left-footed
noticed it.
number 9 as well
Yeah,
is very rare to come by, and it's almost an advantage to be a left-footed number 9 to be that good.
yeah. It's I'd never really like. I sort of understood and like I knew the hype was there, but I was never sort of anti the hype or I'd super bought into it. But this weekend, I was just like, man, this guy is just going to absolutely light up the league, which
And I think a
is
lot of
really
people,
scary.
yeah, and I think a lot of people are in exactly your sort of position there. I know this guy's been hyped, but I didn't realize that he was, you know, and people are already saying he's played one game in the league. And people are already saying, I knew he was good, but I didn't know he was the next Ronaldo good. No,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like people are sort of coming to that conclusion already.
A lot of people describe him as a generational talent, and I'd sort of gone, yeah, maybe. But yeah, I'm sort of starting to buy into it, starting to understand where people are coming from. Moving on though, Leicester, they hosted Brentford on last night as well in the third match. Leicester jumped out to a 2-0 lead at home, but second half goals to even Ivan Toney, and Josh De Silva. Highlight of the game was definitely Kiernan Dewsbury Hall's goal late in the first half. I know Jesse would have liked it. He's been screaming out for more screamers, and this was definitely a screamer. So if you haven't seen it yet, go hunting out for that one.
I mean, this is a big come from behind draw from Brentford. That's all I've got to say is 2-0 down and they get a point. It's it's a mentality thing, and they've shown that they're there to try and stick around. So that's a huge point.
A huge point, I think, both for Brentford, but also for Leicester too. I mean, Leicester, I still don't think they've signed a player yet. They've had their captain leave. There's still talk of Tielemans leaving. Still talk of Madison leaving. I saw it was a very clickbaity sort of headline a couple of days ago about Leicester maybe being in sort of relegation sort of trouble. And I thought, yeah, that's ridiculous. But like the more you think about it, like this Leicester team is it's really set up for an absolute shocker of a season. And it's not really until I thought about it and sort of watched the highlights and stuff from this game that I thought, well, there's all the recipe, there's all the ingredients here for this to go terribly wrong for Leicester this season. And I really hope it doesn't because they had sort of a couple of years, even post the title of just being a really fun team to watch. And I mean, Jamie Vardy's still not the player that he used to be, and so you just sort of wonder is the House of Cards going to come crashing down? Moving on though, Crystal Palace, they hosted Arsenal in the Patrick Vieira derby. This was Premier League opening day. We're skipping back to Friday night / Saturday morning. A Martinelli header and Mark Gahey own goal gave Arsenal the 2-0 win. Mate, after all of the preseason hype, did this Arsenal performance live up to the fans' expectations?
It's a pretty dead game, to be honest, to be the opening game of the Premier League. I felt it was a bit bogged down in midfield. Nothing really much happened. I don't think you got a real indicator of either side's sort of potential this season. It was hard to judge either team on their performance from that game, in my opinion.
Okay. I thought there was a couple of things that I sort of picked out of it. And first of all, I thought Arsenal did do a really good job of sort of controlling the game, at least in the first half. Palace just couldn't get out of their own half, just were struggling to play sort of in any meaningful way against the Arsenal high press, and they seem to be doing a really good job of sort of executing Arsenal's game plan. But then in the second half, and the Tifo did a really good sort of breakdown of how Crystal Palace's approach changed in the second half, just going far more direct and looking for knockdowns and bypassing the press. And Crystal Palace were very effective at that. So the takeaway for me was that Patrick Vieira, his tactical flexibility was
Yeah, he's
the
got
big
more strings
takeaway.
to his bow than people thought he did.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone thought, oh, like for most ex players who played at the highest level, you think, oh, look, I'm sure they've sort of seen a bit. But to be able to sort of make that change and communicate it to his players, and his players actually be able to go out and execute it, that for me boded quite well for the season coming for Crystal Palace. And Crystal Palace were a team where I thought, oh yeah, I think they're going to go really well this season. And then I thought, wait, why do I think they're going to go really well? And this was sort of after our preseason pod last week. I was second guessing myself, but look, I'm trying to find positives after the 2-0 loss. The other couple of things that stood out for me, I thought it was interesting that Odegaard has been picked as their captain at Arsenal. Not something that I was expecting to see. And the other thing that I wanted to pick out was Odegaard's failure to shoot. It's obvious that he's got the same genes as Mesut Ozil did or does, and just I think he was on the 6-yard box, 1-on-1 with the goalkeeper, and he tries to pass square to I think it was Martinelli on his left, and you think, what are you doing, mate? I think at that point it was still only 1-0, and I think you would have just been sitting there if you're an Arsenal fan or don't like Palace. You would have just been screaming at the TV or screaming at him if you were at the game. Comment from George in the chat. Big shout out to Saliba. Looked very good. George says he's a big unit as well, which I mean, thanks for your input, George. But that is a very good point. Saliba, I think, was at Marseille last season. Excuse me, come in and done really well in this first game. And so it'll be interesting to see if Ben White returns back into the middle with Tomiyasu returning from injury, or if Saliba stays in the middle and Ben White slides back to the bench, or maybe he'll hold his position. But still an interesting position for Arsenal to be in, and a good problem for Arteta to have depth at the back. Moving on, then Fulham, they hosted Liverpool in the early game on Saturday. Fulham threatened a boil over in their return in their first game in their return to the Premier League, as they took the lead twice. Really, really good performance from Fulham, and I don't think anyone was expecting this to play out the way that it did. Dame, are you second guessing your first impressions of Fulham?
No, I'm not. I think I put this down to a very much of a home ground sort of bounce when you're being promoted. There's this big hype, right? Mitrovic feels like he's got something to prove. The Fulham fans and players and the club itself feels like they've got something to prove in the Premier League. And what better challenge than come up against Liverpool, who have been, one of the standard bearers of the Premier League for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years. This is just more, Fulham were just more up for the game than Liverpool. And I think you said at the top of the show that Liverpool looked particularly poor this weekend. And I think that was more it than Fulham being particularly good. We did see Mitrovic was able to physically bully some people, and he'll probably do that all year. But I don't feel like that made Fulham particularly have a really good game. I think they did things well that kept the momentum and kept the fans believing they could win. They went 1-0 up. There was an equalizer. They scored again quickly. The fans kept believing they could win. The ground was loud. The people were into it. I think it was more of a case of Fulham and the fans being up for it than the side actually being a really good team. And that'll catch up to them. Like we said in the Premier League preview, that catches up to promoted teams. And at what point do they get bogged down in the season, and can their defense keep them from losing games is the question.
A couple of things for me. The first one was this. It really reminded me a lot of Brentford versus Arsenal first game of the season last
Yeah,
year.
I had
We
that
had a
exact same vibe.
team that was really up for it against a team that wasn't quite at their
Looks
best.
underdone, right? Look
Yeah,
very
and
underdone.
well, not just that, but obviously Liverpool lost one of their best players and sort of a couple of new guys who are still sort of settling into the team. Allison missed the Community Shield, and Darwin's still very much sort of coming into the squad as a new player, and Firmino just hasn't really played much for them over the last couple of months as well. So all of the ingredients were there for a Fulham win, but at the same time, and maybe this speaks more to sort of the future of Fulham. Fulham didn't win this game, and this is despite them sort of having sort of one of their best performances that no one expected them to have. They still didn't win the game, which, like, I think I say that you've got to win the games where you play well, and or draw games where you don't play well, right? And I
This
know it's
almost
against
feels to
Liverpool.
me like it was the game when Norwich beat City a few years ago, and that was the peak of their season.
Hmm.
This almost, and that was like 2 or 3 games into the season. This feels like Fulham's moment that was sort of the peak of their season. Is we got a point off Liverpool. I'm like, okay, go and win the game. Start the season. You know, they are so proud that they got a point off Liverpool, and they did this and they did that, and they kept Liverpool from playing well. Doesn't have me reevaluating the team that I think they are over the long haul of a Premier League season.
So, like, we tend to see that, like, you need about a month to really determine how a team's going to go, sort of in the season, right? And Fulham's next couple of games, I'll just get up their fixtures now. Fulham have got Wolves away, then they've got Brentford at home, and then then they've got Arsenal at Arsenal, and then Brighton at home. And so they've got a couple of quite winnable games there. You'd think that really they need to come out of the month of August with probably at least one win, hopefully a second, if they're really going to stay up, given that they've got a pretty favourable run though. And you sort of think, for some teams like Nottingham Forest, for example, we'll get to them in a second, but they were really poor, and you know that they're going to come out in their next match and just be absolutely up for it because they've had their reality check, right? Whereas Fulham didn't get a reality check in their first game. They're going to be going to this next game going, oh, well, we did all right against Liverpool, and if anything, you sort of wonder if it's going to lead to a little bit of complacency instead. So interesting times ahead, and I guess it's kind of good that Fulham has thrown this up at this point because it means that we're still curious as to how things are going to play out with Fulham. It was like a 5-0 loss. You would have gone, oh, geez, they're everything we said that they would be. All right, one more thing, though, before we move on. Shannon asks, Torres Francois has not misplaced a single pass so far in the Premier League. Is he better than Xavi?
I mean, well, you can either say he's got a pass completion rate of 100% or 0%. So he's either Xavi or he's Eric Jemba. Which one do you pick?
All right. Leeds, they hosted Wolves in, look, we'll call it entertaining, but I didn't think this was a particularly good game because I just thought Wolves were terrible. Despite taking an early lead, Wolves, as I said, were pretty poor. Jose Sarr almost dribbled the ball into his own goal, and Wolves twice just seemed absolutely adamant in giving the ball away to Leeds in the lead up to Rodrigo's equaliser. Question for you, Damo. Connor Cody, he seems to be on the outer at Wolves, and as a result, Wolves returned to 4 at the back for this game. Last year, Bruno Lage's Wolves started with 4 at the back, 2 at the beginning of the season, but reverted back to a back 3 after a poor start. And we may have seen the beginnings of a poor start for Wolves again here as well. So 2 things. Where do you see Connor Cody ending up? Either somewhere else in the Premier League or somewhere else? And I guess the second part of this question, does Wolves' poor performance, what does that mean for Wolves' poor performance, and maybe with them returning or staying with a back 4 mean for you?
Well, I think both of those questions are really tied into each other, right? Because if Wolves stay with a back 4, Cody really probably has to leave. But if they go to a back 3, well, you can't not pick him. He's one of those back 3 if they play a back 3. So I think the fact that he is the option that Bruno Lage has of playing a back three. That's sort of where they sit. Is he has options? Can we play three? Can we play four? To have those options is a good thing in the Premier League, depending on who's fit, who's not. If all your centre backs are fit, let's do it. If one or two are injured, we play four at the back. So, I mean, in terms of where do I see Connor Cody going, he's going to stay at Wolves. I don't think I see him going anywhere, purely for the fact that they will be fluid in the way they play their formations this year. The manager won't stick to one thing. So he'll play a lot of games, whether it's exactly where he wants to play or not. I don't see him going anywhere at this moment.
Fair enough. Tom Aldred fan page asks, and I'm going to paraphrase here: are Wolves the shortest team you've ever seen? It seems like they're all 1.6 meters tall.
I'd love to research this. Who is the shortest team in Premier League history? It doesn't seem like they're very short. Maybe it's those Portuguese genes. They've really leaned into Portugal. Maybe Jesse can give us some insight into if the Portuguese people are really small.
Get a sample size of the Jesse's in-laws. Yeah, definitely. Newcastle, they hosted Nottingham Forest. A bit of a battering for the Forest, for the tricky trees, the Reds, at St James's Park, and definitely the worst performance of the three newly promoted teams. Fabian Schär and Callum Wilson got the goals, as Forest couldn't muster a shot on target for the entire game, and a clinical result for Newcastle. Tottenham, they hosted Southampton. James Ward-Prowse opened the scoring there, and it looked like Southampton could be a massive speed hump for Spurs, but in the end, they just turned out to be a small speed hump, as Tottenham scored 2 in the first half and then another 2 in the second half to go through the gears and really clinically finish off the game as well. Ryan Sessegnon and Dejan Stankovic, Kulusevski, both got on the score sheet and both took the limelight for a Spurs team that's been criticised in the past for being basically just the Kane and Son show. Would Spurs evolving beyond just being Kane and Son, what would that mean to you for their title chances or in other competitions?
Yeah, I mean that's crucial to Spurs winning something this year, right? Is not having to lean so heavily on those two and that partnership. I think one of the most interesting things was Spurs absolutely dominated this game pretty much from start to finish. Although Southampton went 1-0 up, it was very much against a run of play. It was just an incredible piece of technique from James Ward-Prowse that was able to score the goal. But Spurs never looked in doubt here. They went 1-0 down. They still just played the same way. But one of the most interesting parts was all these people they've bought, right? And we've talked a lot about Spurs have bought so many people. Finally, they've done work in the transfer market that gives them depth and gives them this advantage that they haven't had for years. Not one of them started. They had they did not start one of their new signings in this first game of the season, which I think is an indicator from Conte that he really believes in the depth that he's got at the club, and that I don't want to show my full hand yet. And I think there's more to come from Spurs. I honestly do. I think they're a really good team. There's a great mentality in the team. And players like Sessegnon and Kulusevski scoring goals is only going to be great for the team. And I think in the preseason preview, I said that a lot is going to lean on, there's going to be a lot of pressure leaning on Kulusevski. Can he continue to perform the way he did at the back end of last season, which was a very short spell in terms of a Premier League season? Can he do that over the space of a whole season? Well, game one, he's already scored. So signs is that, and I've got a couple of friends who are Spurs fans, and one of them's already gone as far as saying he sees Kulusevski as important as Kane and Son this season.
Ooh, wowee. That's massive. But I mean, Kulusevski really went sort of under the radar as one of the players of the season last year, even though he only played in the second half of the season. I thought he was that good, that influential, and that effective. So I think we talked a lot about Kulusevski just now, but how good was it seeing Ryan Sessegnon just looking the part in the Premier League after he's had a pretty tough last 2 years, 3 years, sort of both at Fulham in the Prem, and then at Spurs, where pretty much he didn't play for about 12 months. So that's really pleasing to see him doing well after a rough couple of years. And because remember, he absolutely lit up the championship when he first sort of burst onto the scene. Everyone went, "Oh, this guy's going to kill it," and then he just no one saw him for 2 years. So.
Well, Conte is probably going to be the best thing that ever happened to Sessegnon, because we've seen Conte's got a history of turning attacking wide players into marauding wingbacks who can do, pretty much everything in a wide position. And Sessegnon was that, right? He broke onto the scene in that Fulham side in the championship as a left winger.
Mm.
He went to Spurs and he played on the right side, on the left side of a back four, and that really wasn't anything he had ever done in his career. And now Conte's come in, and we've seen that transition many, many, many times before. Obviously, the famous one, Victor Moses at Chelsea, and he's done it with Perisic at Inter, who he's now brought to Spurs as well. So Perisic, I said in my season preview, was going to be a huge part of the way Spurs operate this season, and it's clear that Sessegnon's going to play a role too in a very similar sort of position, understanding of that role, and that's going to be a great sort of like for like replacement whenever they need to rest.
The late kick on Saturday saw Chelsea take a 1-0 win over Everton at Goodison. Jorginho was the one who converted from the spot. Maybe sad to see Jorginho ditch the hobby boy pen.
Yeah, I missed the jumpy boy. I'm really that was the biggest headline from the game, was that Jorginho didn't do a jumpy boy penalty, and that's saying something. Because to be fair, it was a pretty boring game. Let's be honest.
But both, well, I think Frank Lampard said he was really happy with the performance and was basically just sort of disappointed that they didn't get anything from the game. Said
How
that
can
they
you be
created...
happy with the performance where you lose at home? I don't understand Frank Lampard's mentality with the media. He just doesn't understand how to talk to the media about his team's performance. And we've spoken about this before, Tommie. He doesn't know what to say, and when he does say something, it feels like he says the completely wrong thing.
Glenn Hoddle spoke about his post-match comments, Frank Lampard's post-match comments. And I actually thought he was bang on. He said that Frank Lampard, in that point, was he's starting his team talk for the next week. It was, guys, we did really well, and kind of trying to build them up for the next game, which is kind of true, because I don't think the atmosphere in that squad would be particularly good still. There's still got a bunch of players that really haven't performed very well over the last 2 years. They only just avoided relegation in the second last round of last season. So this is still a team where he's really got to build them up. And I think it was ridiculous kind of what he was saying objectively, but I still think in terms of sort of communicating with his team indirectly, I thought it was probably the right way to go. And it was kind of, I actually quite like Glenn Hoddle as a pundit. He seems to have some good insights, and not always the most obvious thing to say either. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's good. I like that, and you'll like that from a pundit, because I mean, we watch a lot of football, and there's a lot of times we listen to a pundit and go, what the hell are you talking about? That's bullshit, right? So that's goodness. But all right, let's keep moving though. The final match that we're going to cover is Bournemouth versus Aston Villa. Bournemouth obviously just come up from the Championship after a year out of the Prem, and they offered one of the biggest surprises of the first match day with a 2-0 win over Aston Villa. Jefferson Lerma got on the score sheet instead of getting a yellow card before 29-year-old, I was going to say 99-year-old, 29-year-old Kiefer Moore opened his account on his Premier League debut. So great result for Bournemouth, and would be pretty disappointing for Aston Villa. Got anything to talk about this game, mate?
Yeah, just the one thing I've got to add is my bold claim in our preseason predictions was that Bournemouth would make it to the start of the World Cup without a point. So Kazonis, I think, asked on Twitter this afternoon if there was a transfer window for our Premier League predictions, how would you change it? I'd probably say Bournemouth wouldn't be as bad as I thought, but I still have them getting relegated.
Oh, yeah. And like what we were saying before about Fulham, right? Like Bournemouth now are going to be going into the next round going, oh, yeah, like we won our first game. We're like hot
At
shit
least
here and back
Bournemouth
in the Premier
won,
League
though.
again. True. True. That's a good point. Although they were playing Aston Villa, who finished, like 13th
Yeah,
last
but a
year, as
lot of
opposed
people
to.
have been predicting Aston Villa to finish, in the top 10, even some as high as finishing in European spots. And I've got the receipts in my full Premier League table predictions that I'm keeping tabs on.
Oh, Lordy. All right, fair enough. One thing before we wrap up is I want to talk a little bit of more than a game FPL. So last year we had
Please talk
last
about it.
we'll get to that. Calm me farm, mate. Last year we had 58 people that paid up their subs and were playing in the comp. This year, due to a big effort from yours truly on the final day, drumming up a lot of interest and hustling hard, we got 65 people, so a couple more than last year, which is great for everyone to be involved. So 65 people have paid up, and there's still a few more who have promised me that they've sent some money. So we could even crack 70 at this point in the next couple of days. Obviously, with the season already started, it's getting pretty close to basically where we draw the line in the sand for the competition, though. So I think we'll go pretty close to having 70 people signed up this time around, which is great because obviously more people that are playing, the bigger the prize pool. So good
Yeah,
stuff there.
huge effort from yourself, Tommy, on the pretty much the last 24 hours before the league started. I have no idea how you got any work done that day, but credit to you.
Well, mate, to be perfectly honest, I didn't get any work done on Friday last week. So yeah, it was a pretty grim old day, professionally speaking. But yeah, look, just giving it all for more than a game. Whilst we're on the topic of more than a game, MTAG FPL, it'd be remiss of me to not say who's leading after the first game week, and of course that's our own Damo as well. He came away with the highest score after the first week, so well
Look,
done,
I
mate.
think I'm going to retire from FPL. This is I want to thank my family. I want to thank my coaches. I want to thank TikTok for giving me some good advice. Yeah, this is probably the pinnacle of my FPL career, and it'll never get higher than this. So thank you, and thanks for the memories.
Well said, mate. All right, that pretty much wraps up the show for this week. But look, do unfortunately probably have some bad news for everyone. This season, where and I kind of alluded to this a little bit in our preview pod, saying that we're unlikely to be doing as many pods this season as maybe we would like, or as what we have previously done. A couple of the panelists on the pod, they've got some big stuff coming up in their life, and unfortunately, as much as I can sacrifice my work day on a Friday to more than a game, there are some things that still are bigger than more than a game. So we're looking at probably doing at least one pod per month. We're looking at doing obviously an A-League preview pod. We're looking at doing a World Cup preview pod and a World Cup, a post World Cup pod as well. But unfortunately, it is meaning that we're unlikely to be doing a weekly pod every week for 50 odd weeks over the next couple of months. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but unfortunately, sometimes bigger things than football call. But look, still going to be have plenty of plenty presence on social media and the like over the next couple of months. And of course, if you want to get in touch with us, you can always email us or get in touch through the socials as well. But until I would say next week, but until next time, enjoy the football.
Let's go.